Welcome back to our listeners and viewers of The Responsible Edge, the podcast where we explore the bold ideas, uncomfortable truths, and unexpected solutions shaping the future of ethical business. Today, we're drawing from Robin Hicks's revealing eco-business article, Chief Sustainability Officers Are Burning Out. Has the role become unsustainable? It's a bracing look at the pressures mounting on CSOs and a rallying cry for shared responsibility. And to make sense of all of this, I'm absolutely thrilled and delighted to be joined by Magali Anderson, Board Director, Engineer, and former Chief Sustainability and Innovation Officer at Holcim, and founder of the Secret Society of Sustainability Spies, S4. Intriguing stuff. Magali, it's absolutely brilliant to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Charlie. Very, very happy to be here today.
Now, Magali, I've done a very, very brief introduction to what you're working on right now, and you have various different roles that you're involved in at the moment. For our listeners and viewers who aren't aware of your work, would you mind just giving us a little bit more meat on the bone in terms of, what you're doing right now?
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. So I've been, until about a year ago, I was Chief Sustainability Officer, as you said, and Innovation of Holcim, and loved my job, but decided it was time to move on. And now I am a board member, but I am trying to bring to the board the voice of sustainability. And but I'm also involved working with startups. And I also, like you said, try to launch this S4 in training staff. So that gets me kind of busy.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've just given us a whistle-stop tour there, but I know, for example, you're joining us this morning from the south of France, where you've just been involved in a book launch for a colleague of yours. You've got much on your plate, so I appreciate you fitting this in. Of all the things that you're involved in, because obviously our listeners and viewers can go and check out your LinkedIn profile, which we'll link to so they can see all of the different things you're doing. But just tell us a little bit more about S4. It's very intriguing. What are you trying to do with that?
It's funny. I really like how you titled that episode of saying, is sustainability officer becoming unsustainable? That makes it quite complicated for any non-English speaking person, but I think we get what you are trying to say. And it is happening. It's definitely happening. The CSO who, we went from sustainability being something that maybe some people were doing, but not in all companies and not very visible, to the golden age of sustainability where CSO were at the executive committees of companies, were running the show. Everyone was talking about it. If you look at companies' communication, it was all about sustainability. Unfortunately, that golden age didn't last very long. It only lasted, 3-4 years maybe? And now we are looking at the drop right after, where CSOs are not anymore at the executive committee level. They are coming down one level, where they are being pushed into reporting. And we'll talk about that much more at length, I know, during that podcast. But so my thing was, okay, if the companies don't go to sustainability, let's the sustainability go to the company. Either they want it or not. Either they know it or not, in fact. And hence the title, which is Secret Society of Sustainability Spies. It's not that secret. I mean, there's a open group in LinkedIn. So we are not, even though we did create a secret handshake. But the whole idea is to say, it came from the realization that a lot of people in their job wants to do more. And they feel some kind of eco-anxiety, or at least a disconnection between their values and what they have to do in their day-to-day job. So some of them have been contacting me and saying, Magali, how did you do? How did you go from this oil and gas industry, where I had a fantastic time, by the way, to becoming a CSO? How did you make that leap? And how can I do the same? And I'm like, don't even try. Not because I'm special and only me could do it. Don't even try, for several reasons. Reason number one is I was super lucky. It happened because basically right time, right moment, alignment of stars, Swiss cheese holds, whatever you want to say. My boss had decided to create a CSO job, first time in the industry. I happen to walk in the corridor that day and he just say, you do it. And I'm like, yeah, sure. But how your chances of having that is about zero, right? Because in a lot of places, they would go and recruit someone from outside. No one would have recruited me as a CSO with my CV. Nobody. And I've talked a lot with a lot of headhunters about it, and they all confirm it. Absolutely not. So their CV, if it's the same than mine, I'm telling them, forget it, you won't be recruited. So that's point number one. But point number two is what I just said before, which is, anyway, why do you want to become a CSO? Because you have no power. If you're not at the executive committee, you're not going to have any power. You won't be able to change the things you want to change. So instead of that, stay where you are, because where you are, especially you have a certain power of your role. And the higher you are in the hierarchy, the more power you have. And you control and you understand your business extremely well. You understand your job extremely well. So why don't you transform your own job? And don't ask for permission. The S4 should be S4 without permission as a total title. Because that's the thing. We spend a huge amount of time trying to discuss, how do we convince the boss? How do we convince that? How do we get a ton from the top? Well, okay, some people are really good at advising how to do it. Not many people manage to apply it, but fine. So I'm saying, at your level, don't even try. Change your own job and don't tell anybody. It's very likely that nobody will notice. So there's many things you can tweak in your job without anyone understanding what you are doing. And if you get caught, well, you will find a way to get away with it. It's okay. So that's why it's Secret Society of Sustainability Spies.
I love it, Magali. It's got a real like Trojan horse element to it. The idea that you've just got all of these little Trojan horses that are going under the radar that hopefully are just enabling the change organically within the organization. I think it's a brilliant concept, and obviously aligns very well with the article that we're going to be looking at today in terms of perhaps some of the conclusions from that. Before we go any further, though, I'm so intrigued. You've kind of alluded to it a little bit there, talking about your previous careers, but I want to go back to the very beginning, the origin story of Magali Anderson, if possible. I want to understand, from your experience of growing up, from your experience of your education, perhaps the early part of your career, like what are the most kind of formative experiences that have shaped your view of the world that you can tell us about and ultimately have led you to do what you've done with your career?
Really not much, because I come from that little village at the middle of France somewhere where the destiny of the vast majority of the people from that village is to get married within 10 kilometers and never move, right? That's why all my majority of my school friends have done, and what certainly I should have done. So I don't know why. Certainly my parents' education opened my eyes, but I decided to go, just becoming an engineer, just leaving, going to Lyon to do engineering was one thing. And then at the age of 20, I went to Mali, Africa, for people who know. I went to Bamako, Mali, Africa, to try to, at that time, doing something which I thought would save Africa. Not that Africa needs saving, but that's how I thought about it when I was 20. And of course, I came back, spent 2 months there trying to make soap with a group of women. I mean, that was kind of NGO. I had managed to get financing to do that. And several things happened when I did that. Completely fell in love with the continent, completely fell in love with Africa, with the values, the lifestyle, the community spirit, which was completely different from money-driven type of spirit. I completely realized that I had absolutely no clue how to help anybody in that country, and anyone who thinks that living in Europe or in France, that they can go and help people in such country, normally will get it wrong. 99% chances we get it wrong, because you have no idea of the collateral effect of what you are doing, etc. And the third thing it told me, if I put these two together, is that that's where I wanted to be. That's what I wanted to do. Now, it's not very obvious why then I choose the oil and gas industry. But if you think about it, we're talking 36 years ago here. So we're talking a time which people listening to some of will completely freak out about, is a time where internet did not exist. So it was not that easy to go and travel. So when I found the oil and gas industry, what I understood of it was adventures, going to those weird countries where you normally wouldn't go on vacation, and science. So the mix of all, and I absolutely loved it. So, and this is how my very first job at the age of 22 was working on an offshore rig in Nigeria, Wari to be specific. And my love for Africa consolidated there. So I don't know how I ended up doing it. Like I said, doing that, there was no real rim of reasons. And after the rest is history. Once you start there, you continue until, and at that time, the social part was important. When you're in the oil and gas industry, the social part is very important because you try to do a lot of good things where you live. Even everybody manage, but you try. But I think but I did not have any clue about climate change. I guess I was not informing myself. There's no real excuse to it, but that's how it was. So I did my whole career, or vast majority of my career, with Schlumberger. And it's a company where you change job in a very regular base. So I was changing job every 2 years and made me a full trades. And that's when and age of 50, you know, if you're a man, you buy your sport car. In my 50 realization was, what am I doing? By then I was starting to figure out about a lot of things and really clearly, what am I doing? I want purpose in my life. And that's when I became health and safety group head for Holcim. And that was great.
Magali, I'm sorry to interrupt you in full flight, but I've got a really, I think I'm really interested to ask you this question because of your experience and the uniqueness of it. When you got to that moment of reflection and realization of your career in oil and gas and the very, I think the very understandable reasons why the 22-year-old you was attracted to it in terms of, you know, you described the travel and you described the ability to be involved in science and you described the opportunity to be involved in you know, in Africa, etc. What was it like for you reflecting on your career now that you knew about the impact of climate change and you couldn't unknow that? How did it make you feel personally about what you had done in your career to that point?
You know, neither bad or good, because frankly, there's absolutely no point to feel guilty about anything you've done in the past. I've done it because at that time, like I said, I just science adventure, loved it, great. I did it the best I could. That's it. You know, reflecting back and feeling guilty about what you did in the past not only makes you feel terrible and it's mental health wise, and the article talks a lot about mental health. That's not good. But worse than that, I think that to let your past stop you from your future is the worst thing that can happen. It's, you know, people who say, and it's funny because I have had some discussion with many young people, and I've had old people telling me, how can you be credible in sustainability with your past? And I'm like, well, young people actually understand it very well. They understand very well that, yeah, wake up call, fine. Maybe I should have had that wake up call before, maybe. But if I had, let's imagine that at the age of 22, I found something about climate change which completely opened my eyes. Maybe I would have worked for some NGO, maybe I would have done. But the thing is, today, at the age of 58, so quite a few years later, I wouldn't be in the situation where I am now, where I can make great changes because of that life. And I think that's what is more important than anything else. I know the industry so well that I'm very well positioned to make it change from the inside. So really, nobody should be ashamed of their past. On the contrary, should look at how their past can be a super powerful tool to change the present.
I'm so delighted that you responded in that way. That was my immediate reflection on that question was, what a brilliant set of learned experiences and skills you would have developed during that career to enable you to understand what needs to happen to change things properly. So I couldn't agree with you more. And I love for anyone out there that's thinking about shifting in their career, pivoting in their career, understand that whatever that experience is that they have up to that point can be the breeding ground and the foundations for what they do next. I think it's brilliant. Sorry, you were about to...
I was going to say, and in the meantime, if you can't shift career, join the Secret Society of Sustainability Spies.
Yes.
Because this is where you have acquired so much knowledge, you can change things where you are right now.
I love that, Magali. That's a brilliant... And by the way, we'll be obviously linking to all the various... we're definitely linking to S4 and obviously to other sites that are related to Magali's work. So absolutely great plug. I love the fact that you got that in there. Magali, talk me through then what happens for those 8 years. What was it like having your first role in sustainability, being a sustainability lead? What was that experience like for you? Was it different to what you expected? What were the sort of the challenges, if you like?
So, definitely was different because I had to look in the dictionary what sustainability meant, right? When I got the job. So I was not expecting anything in reality, but the nice thing about my previous career is that Schlumberger was doing that all the time, putting you in jobs where you had no clue, you had zero experience. So that was I was not afraid of. I think what's really happened is that there was a fantastic team of experts who'd been there. The cement industry is very advanced when it comes to sustainability. So they've been doing reporting since the 90s. The very first target they took was 2002. So imagine, compared to the type of discussion we have today, they were extremely advanced. What they had failed to do was to position that into part of the strategy, to put it at the right level in the company. Mm-hmm. And this is where I can bring value, not just me as a person, but the fact that the role was a CSO role at executive committee level. So basically, it's not anymore a function trying to influence somehow, whatever. It's a function that is part of every single discussion we are having at the executive committee, every single investment discussion, strategy discussion, you name it. So it's completely embedding it. Now, the strengths that my past was giving me is that when I was trying to put the program together, I knew, because I was in those shoes not that long ago, I knew exactly what operation people, how they think, what they want to hear, what they prioritize, so I knew how to talk to them. I speak the same language. I speak the business language. So I was not going to see them with very technical things, and which I wouldn't be capable of in all fairness about sustainability, but I was coming to tell them the way I would have myself liked to be talked to. And that makes a huge difference. And that's why when I was talking with a lot of my sustainability peers and they were telling me things like, I am training my people about climate change. I'm not doing it. Because if being trained about climate change was changing the way you do your job, if that was happening, would be fantastic news, but it's not happening. And we all know it. We all know it's not happening. What works is alignment of objective, preparing action plan, putting bonus system that are related, blah, blah, blah. All of that works. And so I really decided to treat sustainability as I would treat a new business plan. Mm-hmm. And by taking it, which is what I am good at, which is what I've been doing in my previous life a lot. So you have a business plan. What is it? It's about an enterprise vision of a new thing they want to do. And then you put the action plan, the resources, and you put the KPIs that go with it. And then you move on with your work plan.
And that is beautifully described. And even that in of itself, I think, is just brilliant strategic advice, Magali, for anybody out there that's thinking through embedding sustainability as you described into the core and the fabric of their organization. I want to ask you, though, you stayed at Holcim for, was it 7 years or 6-7 years?
8, yeah.
8 years. What would be, having started and obviously left the organization, what would be your report card for yourself and the sustainability function whilst you were at Holcim? How would you score your time there in terms of the impact that was had?
20 out of 10.
20 out of 10. Brilliant.
No, seriously. No, I'm absolutely serious. It's with the team, because the team had done such a fantastic job. I was the trigger that, the thing that turned it around.
Yeah.
Because the foundation, everything was there. But what we did, Holcim became a leading organization. And today, this is how it's vision, not by me, by other people. Harvard Business Review made an article about 2-3 months ago where they were mentioning the 10 companies that have transformed themselves. Holcim was named. Just yesterday, I found an article which was looking at transparencies of companies when it comes to climate lobbying. Mm-hmm. And they mentioned a few, and Holcim was one of them. So we have transformed that company. So that's point number one. But we did more than that. We transformed the sector. And the reason we did that is because when we started, so it took me about a year to come with the net zero pledge, the longest project I've ever done, because normally I'm used to do work strategy and work on the work plan. It took me a year. Why did it take me a year? Is because I wanted it to be as robust as it gets, like 100% robust, zero potential, zero angle for any backlash whatsoever. And for that, I needed to do a bottom up, top down, science-based, you name it. All box ticks, not one left. And we announced it in September 2021, which is almost 4 years ago. There hasn't been any article substantiated saying that it was greenwashing of any kind. So that work was very important. But then one of the resistance I got, which I did not expect, is that the oil and gas industry, cement industry, sorry. Actually, the oil and gas industry is not, but cement industry is quite conservative. Mm-hmm. And one of the resistance was becoming the first one to do it. So I really had to fight that because people were convinced it was good, the right thing to do, but we don't want to be the first one, which is quite funny, right? Many other sectors, you fight to be the first one and etc. So once we did it, our main competitors followed it. They decided that they could do it because we had basically opened the track. They've seen the investors' reaction, the street reaction, the market reaction was actually okay, so we can do it. So then there's something about the cement industry which is very important and very useful, is they have something called the Global Cement and Concrete Association, meaning the association, but that association is particularly useful and particularly active. So we have the same KPI, we all benchmark each other, etc. of this association. And I could co-chair the work with that association to make that net zero pledge for the entire industry. Basically, this association represents 80% of the cement made outside China. So it's pretty significant in terms of footprint. And we worked on the roadmap, the technical roadmap, so which means we actually calculate what to do, which levers to use, etc., to go to zero by 2050. And that was signed by all the CEOs of that association. And again, it's technical. We're not talking compensation here. We're really talking technical work to go down to zero. So I think, frankly, and then I could tell you about what we did in nature, because here I'm talking a lot about CO2, but we also we became one of the first 3 companies to be SBTN. A lot of people understand SBTI, but not many SBTN. We did a science-based strategy on nature as well, on biodiversity, on water. So frankly, if I had looked at when I took the job, what my expectation were, frankly, there's not much because I had no idea what to expect. But today, I don't think I could have ever expected that we would do as well as we actually did.
So, and Magali, thank you. So you've now fully justified your 20 out of 10 score that you've given yourself. I completely understand. there's almost like a mic drop moment, I think, when you conclude on your 7-8 years there. I've got one final question for you before we move on to the article that is kind of related, I suppose. When you now think about the rest of your career from this point onwards, and you've obviously described earlier the things that you're now doing, and and then you get to the end of it and you're looking back, what would success in this period look like?
It's all about impact. The only thing I'm interested in is impact. And the reason I was originally looking for another executive job, but I didn't, because there's no more CSO job at executive committee level. And I refused to become a reporting person. So, which is what most companies expect from a CSO nowadays. So I didn't want to go there. So, and I didn't think I was going to find something as impactful as what, again, the reason I could do that in Holcim is because all the stars aligned. So is going to find something as exciting with as much potential impact, etc. So then I thought, okay, well, in that case, the other way to have impact is to be working with, on the board level and trying to influence companies from the boardroom. So that's why I decided to go this way. So, yeah.
And when you think about, last question on you, because I love what you're doing there. You're almost applying the S4 sort of mentality and strategy to yourself, aren't you, in terms of the roles that you're now taking on? Out of interest, if you were to think about like your collective optimism for the sustainability agenda at large, and I know that's a big question. There's lots of elements to it, but how optimistic or not are you about the future?
Well, there's clearly some big headwinds at the moment, which is pushing us back, right? And we all know what it is, so I don't need to bore your audience to death by describing what's happening today. So clearly, the reason I'm staying optimistic, or I'm trying to anyway, is because when you look at people higher in the hierarchy, there's more and more who start saying, yeah, no, it's not right. We need to do something. And those people have power. I am a believer of what the kids can do to their parents. So if you remember this famous climate track thing, which involved many, many kids, well, those kids' parents are the deciders of this world. I remember one day my CEO saying that he was feeling better now when he was talking to his kids because he could answer them. He could answer them their challenge of, Dad, what are you doing? You're the CEO of this super polluting company. So he had something to answer them. So I'm really hoping that this movement, despite what's happening now, more and more people will do it because they just know we need to do it. Because they think of their kids, they think of everything else, and they want to act.
Well, you're going to get your first here of the show, Magali. Well, I give out here's, I think, to guests that nail particular points, and I couldn't agree more. Let's hope that we have that upward pressure, if you like, exerted on those decision makers and those leaders. Let's move forward, though, now. I know that was a whistle-stop tour through you and your background, and hopefully you've enjoyed the experience, so I might be able to get you back on and we can dive into some other chapters at another time. But for now, Magali, could we possibly just provide a bit of an intro, a summary of the article that I alluded to at the start of the show, just picking out for you whatever you thought were the most interesting points in it?
So, it's funny because so I read that article, and I think a lot of the people interviewed were exactly what I am not, which are CSO expert who made it through the years to the CSO job. And frankly, I admire these people because they've been fighting so hard and they believe so much in their conviction. But one of the problems that a lot of these people are is that they speak Chinese to the rest of the company. And I know your article is all about Asia, so I don't mean Chinese in the real way, right? And the disconnect. So I used to call myself a translator but not translate or a bridge or whatever you want to call it, which is take what the experts are saying we need to do and translate it into actionable things from the operation people. So it's not translating in terms of language. It's not a communication thing here. It's really transforming into something that people can take and say, I can act on that. And a lot of people who are coming from a very strong sustainability background don't know how to do that. And so I could feel a lot of that into the article. Now, what was funny is that there's one sentence that I will read the 2 seconds, which says, one analysis of largest firms in Asia in 2023 found that only 27% of CSO in Malaysia, 17% in Singapore, have both ESG-related qualification and prior working experience in the field. And I thought it was interesting because I actually find that number quite encouraging myself. But I was wondering if this number is due to the majority only have ESG or only have field related. Because the true reality is, for a lot of topics, particularly in the industry, so I'm more talking here for me in the industry, which is my strengths, right? Oil and gas, mining, cement. The topics, at least the nature and CO2 topic, is very, very technical. It's very operational technical. So the operation people, they're smart people. Once we tell them, they know what to do. So I'm not sure why it's important to have both experience. And I am a living example of that. So the other thing I found them about the struggling, there are some of the things that in the article, which for me is are kind of obvious, It's prioritizing. Again, I think one of the mistakes we do in sustainability is we don't take it as a business as I call it business as unusual, with you in bracket. If you take it as a normal business plan, then you align everyone and you go with it. So I find it sad that so many people go on burnout. I understand why. But I think one of the reasons is because we need to look at it as business and not as changing the company for the sake of sustainability. I think mistake a lot of people are making, which lead to them running into a wall, and you can only run into a wall that much before you go into a burnout.
But Magali, doesn't that also lend itself to your previous point in that we need to stop viewing CSOs or sustainability leads as needing to be technically minded, and we need to instead think of them as being influencers, communicators, brokers, negotiators. Those are the key skills, are they not, in order to see the impact of the work you're doing and address a lot of the problems that the article highlights, which is lack of budget, lack of influence, lack of sort of needing to always sort of define your role and provide, value statements for those that are in decision-making positions. So that's what you're describing as the key and core function.
Exactly. But that's exactly what a business person is all about. If you run a filial of a company in a country, that's exactly what you do. And that is why tech reporting. If you talk to CSOs nowadays, all they talk about is reporting. And given between CSRD, which now has become omnibus, et cetera, there's a huge amount of reporting to do. Now, for me, a CSO about reporting would be like a CEO talking about financial reporting. Have you ever heard a CEO being interrogated about his financial reporting? I mean, he should not know anything about it. It's not his role. Now, what you would normally do as a CEO is you would have a vision, and then you would have a financial reporting which tells you if the track to your vision is good or not, right? If your financial reporting goes, or if the result of those reporting goes to crap, then you know you're doing a bad job and you need to adapt. Should be the same for a CSO. But the CSOs, because a lot of them are engineers, and they just love it, and they just love the numbers, and they can't help it. They have to dive into it. So what I tried to do in Holcim, which I think didn't last after I left, but that's another story, is I thought, who are the best reporting people in the world? Finance guys. And that they do. They get reporting degrees. I mean, that's how much I love it. They went to study the topic. Give it to them. Now, does it really matter if you understand to the gram how much CO2 you emit? No. Do it the way you do financial reporting. Give it to them. So let go. And by the way, it's a big task to tell people go to burnout, but a lot of them, they just can't let go. And I'm not trying to blame people, by the way. I'm not putting the blame on the burnout person. I'm just trying to say a few things that you can do. Let go, give it to them, tell them to do it, and focus on using the numbers that come out of the reporting to shape your strategy and to look at where you need to focus your attention, et cetera, et cetera.
Here. Magali, you're going to get your second here on the show. We've had lots of conversations on here of talking about, the modern role of the sustainability lead and why it's sort of, polluted, and maybe the wrong use of term, but, so much time and energy and effort is taken up on the reporting and the monitoring side of things that actually we're losing the essence of what a sustainability lead should be trying to do, which is innovation and creative thought about how we as organizations can evolve and develop. But you just nailed it there.
Yeah,
there's a
changing
practical
the business
solution.
model. You can't go from looking at hundreds of Excel spreadsheets with numbers everywhere and 5 minutes later say, okay, let's change the world. Change the world that never come from Excel spreadsheets. I don't think.
I think we've just got our title for this week's episode. I don't think the world's ever changed from spreadsheets. That's beautiful. Magali, what else? This article, I think I mentioned this to you before the show, but this article I think is about a year out of date. I think it was produced in May 2024. Now, you've alluded to some of the global sort of circumstances that we find ourselves in from a sustainability perspective at the beginning of 2025 or middle of 2025. But are there any things in that article that you now view differently or you think are redundant in light of what's happened over the course of the last year? Or does it all remain very much the same?
I would say, unfortunately, what would have changed is what would have gone worse. Okay. And not better, because as you know, I mean, what's happening today in terms of when investors start removing the pressure on companies, etc., it's not good news. So again, I hear what's happening, and maybe I was lucky, maybe I managed, but one thing let me try to find a way to express it. I was for the same with health and safety than with sustainability. I always told my team that our goal in life is to disappear, is to make ourselves redundant. Now, I used to say, don't quit yet because we still have a lot of job. It's not going to happen tomorrow morning, but that could be your job. Imagine a world where we don't need CSOs.
Yes.
And that's what so if you think of anything you do with that idea that my goal is that I should be made redundant in 5 years because no one should need me anymore, you completely organize yourself differently. And that can sometimes really help you with your resources. So for example, in Holcim, like I already talked about reporting with finance, one of the things we did about the implementation of the roadmap is my boss decided to put a team in place, which was fantastic. But that team didn't report to me. It reported to the operation guy. And that was really important because the operation guy is the one who has the CapEx in his hand, who controls everything. So when he goes and tells his team, you guys need to do this, to do that, they would listen to him because he's their boss. If I am the one telling them, they're like, yeah, nice try, Magali. So I think everything you launch, try to think of it as I am going to my function will disappear, so I need to give that ownership to someone else. And if you could pass it on everywhere, there is a world where we shouldn't need sustainability anymore. But it's not going that way these days, definitely. Like I said, there's a lot of headwinds. In Europe, we're a bit more protected than other parts of the world, no question about it. I truly believe that if we don't manage to convince people that we need to do it for all the reasons we know, there's an angle that maybe is the right angle to bring at the moment for that transition period is a risk angle. The risk angle is absolutely critical because you've seen obviously the news about that village in Switzerland that got covered by a glacier collapsing on it, literally. There's all the flooding. The financial risk for a company that all of these events can bring are huge. So if you don't do it because it's the right thing to do for your kids for whatever reason, do it because you want to mitigate the risk of your company. And there's companies who have lost billions of value overnight because of supply chain disruption due to some flooding somewhere. So think of that. Maybe it's a way to shift a little bit. And the nice thing about it, because there's discussion in the article about struggling to get the CFO on board, which I was super lucky, by the way, in Holcim. I had a super CFO. When she was talking to the investors, sometimes I would talk to her after saying, do you want my job? Is that what you're trying to do? She was so good at it because she was passionate as well.
Yeah.
But if you have a CFO who is not that keen on it, go to your CFO and talk risk. That's a word that CFO understand extremely well, better than anyone else. And you can really and this is why, let's be technical for a second. TCFD and also TNFD, N for nature. So TCFD, for people who don't know, is a task force for climate financial disclosure, is so important because it includes risk. And that can be a new angle you can try to attack in this complicated transition period.
I love it. And let me just ask you one question on that. So we talk a lot about risk and we talk a lot about the influence of risk, as you say, when trying to convince others within the executive sort of decision-making areas of businesses to get on board. What about growth? What about the opportunity of committing to a sustainability agenda for an organization? In your mind, does that play less of a sort of a carrot, if you like, for organizations?
I think the reason I talk about risk more than growth is because I think the growth string has been used to the point of breaking.
Okay.
So everyone tried that. And in some organization, you can really do it. So Holcim, I was lucky. We launched the low carbon cement and low carbon concrete, which is by definition 30% less CO2 than the country standards. So that's significant. And within 3-4 years, it became 25% of the market share. So if you think about it, every company would love to launch a product that's going to become 25% of their sales, right? I mean, it's crazy. I'm not sure all companies can find that, but I fully agree with you. I'm absolutely passionate about change of business model. And if you have people who are CSO who are business minded enough to do that, that's the way to go. Absolutely. I think a lot of them have tried and without really enough success. And that's why I was mentioning the risk. But you're absolutely correct. If you think of business model change, the example I love to give is the one of Philips, which I think is the best example in the world, because when they decided to sell lumen instead of bulbs, what it actually means is you truly decouple your emissions to your sales completely, because the less you change bulbs, the better, the more money you make. So, which means that now your R&D will be fully focusing on making bulbs that last longer. Think what it would mean for all the appliances in the houses. I don't know if you remember, your grandmother washing machine lasted 30 years. Your current washing machine lasts 5 years. It's not completely by chance, right? It's happening for a reason. The moment you make washing machine on lease, companies will be really focusing on how do I make my washing machine last much longer. Same for phones. If they would, suddenly your batteries would stop running out of juice within 2 years of owning your phones. Same for concrete. We were looking at concrete at a project with a university where if you look at the slab, you using a very innovative way of looking at things, which Roman invented when they were building the cathedrals. Well, basically, you look at the strengths, the lines of strengths, and you only put material over those lines. You don't need material between the two. So you can have the exact same slab with only 30% of the cement. Now, if you sell the slab the same price than before, which is not going to happen for very long because your clients are not stupid, you can really make a fantastic margin, right? So again, there's many examples. Now, the last example I just gave, it looks great on the paper. What it means for a company like Holcim is that suddenly you go from selling concrete as a commodity to selling an object. And not only it means a complete different way of selling. You don't sell to the same people. You don't sell to, but you also have the risk of becoming competitors of your own clients.
Yes.
So it's a big DNA shift, which is very complicated. And that's why I think a lot of companies are very cautious about making that step. But you're right. Maybe I should have started with that. The business model change, absolutely what we need to do. If you don't find a way with your own business, if you just don't manage to think outside the box, or maybe you've tried everything, nothing works, and maybe you can't get your company, well, you have two choices. You can try to finance a startup, and I love working with startups, to become the disruptor of your own industry. So that's one way to do that. That was one way also to convince your company, if we don't do it ourselves, someone will come and disrupt us. So maybe we should be our own disruptors. Or the other option, that's what I was mentioning about risk, is talking about risk as another way to bring the topic.
I love it. And in an ideal world, Magali, I suppose you would have these different sort of streams, if you like, of thinking around your organization happening concurrently. And ultimately the CSO would be able to sort of look across the board, if you like, at the risks, at the opportunity for growth, et cetera, and the redefining of the business model. Magali, we've had a whistle-stop tour, I know, but you can see that the time has flashed by. I've got so many more questions that I would want to ask you, but I'll leave it for next time. For now, let me ask you the magic wand question. I'm fascinated to see what you're going to do with this. Magali, if I was to hand you a magic wand and you change one thing about the commercial world this instant, what would that one thing be?
You're talking about the way companies work or the commercial world? Because
whatever way you want to interpret it.
Simple. And the reason I'm doing that is because something doable, even though you gave me a magic thing that may allow me to do things that are not doable, because I want to ground it to something can do. One mega difference you can make in companies, and which we did in Holcim, is to find a way to associate the long-term incentive to sustainability. Once you do that, if every single company in the world had a long-term incentive. Why long-term? Because sustainability takes time. The investment you put in this year will only deliver in 1 or 2 years. So yearly doesn't work. Long-term is better, in my opinion. At least for the big, heavy industries. Maybe for small industries, different. But then it gives you an incredible card. You know, if you go and try to convince someone to do something, and that person is a bit, don't have time, priority, blah, blah, blah. Then the other side says, yeah, no, I get it. It's all right. When the CEO won't get his big bonus, I will tell him that you just don't have time. I'm sure he will understand. So, yeah.
So, and Magali, you've alluded to this at Holcim. So this was in play while you were there, that executive compensation was aligned with long-term.
We put it in place, yeah. The first thing we put in place when I arrived in the job. Because like I said, my thing was about aligning objective. Because once you know, it's extremely unfair to be sitting in your ivory tower somewhere, in my case was Switzerland, and as the guys who are sweating on the ground, the one who brings the money for the company, to say, hey, your objective is to do that, but I'm asking you to do that. Find a way. Yeah. It's horrible, because that person should have a very clear roadmap of what he or she should do, and not having to choose between pleasing Magali, the CSO, or pleasing the CFO. It's not up to that person to make that choice. It's horrible, because whatever they choose will be wrong. If they choose to follow what I told them to do, and that impact their financial objective, then they will be in trouble with their own boss. And if they don't do what I do, I will be screaming at them. So you put them in a complete lose-lose situation. So that's why aligning objective in the ivory tower to make the life of the guy who is sweating every day to make money for the company is the first thing you have to do.
And Magali, let me play devil's advocate. Last question for you, playing devil's advocate on this. It sounds wonderful. It sounds, utopian in many ways to have the organization work like that. How do you reconcile that way of approaching compensation and reward with the system which Holcim operates of profit maximization for shareholders? Like, how do those two things coexist in an authentic way?
So two things. First of all, that's why you need to be at the executive committee, because you have more influence there. But the true reality is, we are champions when we don't want to do things and finger pointing to someone else. We can't do it because investors won't let us do it. We can't do it because legislation, So everyone point fingers, and that's great, like that no one is ever at fault and responsible. But the true reality is majority of investors are actually very supportive of you doing things. They would like you not to sacrifice too much your margin, for sure. They won't give you a leadway to completely sacrifice the financial. But if you come to them with a good win-win strategy and even long-term thinking, investors are much more long-term thinking than we think, as long as what you propose to them is measurable, is well explained, well understood. So, of course, if you come with a fluffy thing, they will tell you off, and rightly so. They should tell you off. Anyone should tell you off. But if you come with a proper roadmap, etc., explain the benefits, even though it might not be short term, might be a bit more long term, frankly, they signed off. So it's a bit too easy to say, investors, and then investors say, whatever. Let's stop finger pointing. Let's do the job.
Here, Magali. Thank you. Brilliant response and rebuttal to my question. It's been an absolute joy having you on the show this morning. Thank you so much for giving up some of your time and sharing your insight and expertise. It's been brilliant. I for one have learned a great deal. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Charlie. It was great. It was a great exchange. I absolutely loved it.
And that's all for today's episode of The Responsible Edge. Enormous thanks to Magali Anderson, engineer, board voice, sustainability strategist, and founder of the brilliant S4, for showing us how quiet revolutions start from the inside. Today, we unpack insights from eco-businesses. Chief sustainability officers are burning out. Has the role become unsustainable? And surface the radical idea that sustainability isn't someone else's job, it's everyone's. As a reminder, this episode was brought to you by the Anti-Greenwash Charter, a not-for-profit movement of responsible communicators challenging greenwashing and championing truth in sustainability. Visit antigreenwashcharter.org to learn more. I'm Charlie Martin. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. See you next time.